Okay, we don't get a cool intro because when I'm
Yeah,
hosting, I don't know what's going on. I know how to start the recording and I know how to end the recording and I know how to answer the questions.
that is more than me.
Welcome.
So
Yeah.
yes.
To anyone already in,
Uh,
welcome to Crunch Time Week 16. I'm Tammy the Gridiron Greek. I'm joined by Nick, better known as Bick. How you doing this morning with your
uh,
Patriots gear?
I'm doing lovely. I love this team. I love this Christmas season, this holiday season. Merry Christmas Eve to you and to everybody watching so far. The vibes are good, man. Back home for the holidays, different setup. I have my fat cat next to me. So we're chilling. I got my Super Bowl
Oh
30
my God.
31 Super Bowl 31 mug. So not going to the Super Bowl this year. I promise you that. I'm hoping they lose out. I want that number one pick. So um, I love the Patriots, man.
Oh, so you're not rooting for them today. You want them to lose to the Broncos?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Um, for some reason, Tim just texted me and said that it was scheduled for 1 p.m., but we're live. So I don't know what he's talking about. So we're going to keep on doing what
Um,
we're doing.
I might have entered the wrong time because I don't know how this works. He did not text me, so
I
this
mean,
sounds
we're
like a
live
you
though.
issue. We are
I
live.
mean,
Everyone, like I said, crunch time. We will answer all your start sit questions until 12 Eastern time. That is 12 noon, not 12 midnight. Unfortunately, games will be over by then. So drop them in the chat, and obviously we have the crunch time guarantee. If you get your questions in afterwards and we're still answering questions, we're still here, we're going to answer them. Doesn't matter if it's 12:05, if it's 2 p.m. and the game's already started and you're still deciding.
mhm,
If you want to be use your commish powers to switch things up and cheat, we'll help you with that. Anything you need, any
absolutely.
collusion
Yeah.
help, yeah, we're here for it. Um,
Yeah.
yes.
While we're waiting, actually, I'm going to start
Mhm.
with a question that I have,
Sure.
just to kind of get the ball rolling a little bit. So Alexander Madison is expected to play today
Mhm.
against Detroit, and even though Kevin O'Connell said that they're trying to make Ty Chandler the guy and get him a majority of touches, and Alexander Madison is more of a depth play at this point. Um, I'm a bit concerned just because Detroit isn't really a favorable matchup as is, and I plugged in my lineup expecting to have all the work, not just most of the work. Now that Madison is back, and we'll see how it even plays out. Um, are you still going Ty Chandler over someone like Jerome Ford this week?
Oh, over Jerome Ford.
Yeah, I drive Jerome Ford on my bench, who I'm considering pivoting to, just because Madison is back, and like I said, it's not an amazing matchup. Detroit, I think, has been beatable on the ground, lately in terms of true matchup rank. I think they've been kind of getting closer to being favorable, but they're still a minus matchup. Um,
They're pretty
I'm
low in true
looking
matchup
at
ranks still, but Houston's not like that
yeah,
great either. They're 18th. There's 0 points over average for them. But I do want to break it down by rushing and
Mhm.
receiving just to see if there's a stark difference. A little more leaning towards receiving, which not maybe not necessarily favors Jerome Ford here. Um,
Right.
I might. I still think Jerome Ford is going to be that guy who consistently puts up like double-digit points, gets like an RB2 finish, and then even with a touchdown, he's probably an RB2, even in like pretty solid matchups. Um,
Right.
I don't even know if Ty Chandler can be that home run hit this week. Like you said, it's not like the greatest of matchups. The offense is probably a lot better, even with their third string right now at this point over the Browns
Mhm.
offense. However, I like unless you really need like some crazy home run hit, even then I think you got to go Jerome Ford for like some safety.
Yeah. Yeah, I know a lot. After last week, everybody was like, "Oh, if you picked up Ty Chandler, congrats, you got an RB2 with an RB1 ceiling for the rest of the playoffs." Blah blah blah. And the whole time I was like, "Yeah, but against Detroit." I don't know. I'm big on the pass catchers in Minnesota. I mean, I have a Nick Mullins, T.J. Hawkinson, Justin Jefferson stack um, in the same league that I'm currently starting Ty Chandler. So I have four Vikings in my starting lineup right now, which is a bit scary, but um, yeah,
Detroit's beatable
I
through
might
the
pivot.
air though, like very beatable. So I don't think it's that big of a. I mean, listen, sometimes they're not beatable, like like last week against
Yeah,
the Broncos. But I don't know if that was like Dan Campbell just like going try hard on his former like mentor, um,
right.
or if they're. I mean, they are just genuinely a good team. And then like when the Broncos can't force turnovers, it's kind of like a shit show for them. Um,
Hmm.
but I think in general we've seen that the Lions like cornerbacks can just be like hit pretty badly. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I might go for it. I'll see how the episode goes and how I'm feeling after. But it looks like we do have some questions in the chat
Yes,
now.
Johnny Petrop with the first question, and he's trying to get some insider info. Who you got, Mullins or Kyler? Let me see if I can put these up on here. Yes, let's go. I know how to do this now. I'm
Oh,
playing
it's
against
him.
Mike in the home league, so you got the Brodo boys with their home league here. Nick Mullins or Kyler Murray? I'm actually quite low on Kyler Murray this week. Just in general, I don't think it's like the greatest of matchups. Um, Chicago doesn't allow like a ton of like rushing production from quarterbacks. I just want to double check what the actual number is. Um, yeah, they're 28th in true matchup rank, so they're like the whatever it is,
Mhm.
fifth, least points over average to QB rushing. And Kyler hasn't been that great overall. He's been like decently solid, um, but he is kind of leaning on rushing production as like a little bit of a floor. Um, Not that he really needed it overall, and I think like
Right.
his passing can make up for it. Um, but man, it's not like that great of a matchup overall. Like, however,
Yeah, I mean,
over like, would you rather start Nick Mullins and risk like a 7 point game, or would you rather risk Kyler Murray and get like 14 points out of him? I think I'd
mhm.
slightly lean Kyler, even though it is like the semifinals for basically every league, and
Yeah.
like you should be making like difficult decisions sometimes. I think I'm going
Mhm.
Kyler, but what are you thinking in terms of this matchup?
So as I was just telling you how I have the Minnesota super stack in that league, I have Kyler Murray as my quarterback, and I picked up Nick Mullins to not to get the stack necessarily, just because I think it's a better matchup, and having the stack is either gonna inflate my day or they're all going down. But the Bears defense has been turning it on as of late, since they traded for Sweat. And, you know, like you were saying, they're not giving up a lot to the rushing. And as someone that's already in this exact situation and pivoting from Kyler Murray to Nick Mullins, I think I would do it at the beginning of the week. This question was brought up in the Brodo Patreon Discord, and subscribe to that if you haven't. It's fucking sick. But um, and we were talking about it, and I started saying I was going to go Kyler over Mullins, and then I talked it out with some people and ended up flip flopping that. So me personally, I'm going Mullins. The matchup is too good. You know, Detroit is the fourth most favorable matchup for quarterbacks right now, and he's got the weapons. I mean, he's got the type of players that he can throw at the line of scrimmage and have him house it. He can throw a slant to Jordan Addison and see him take it. We saw it last week, broken down play nonetheless. But Nick Mullins was playing pretty well, outside of his couple picks, obviously, one of them being absolutely preposterous. But um, um, I'm going Nick Mullins. Long story short, I think he's got great pass catchers that can help elevate him and give him a solid floor. I think he's got a matchup that can elevate him and give him a solid floor. So, and while Kyler Murray has a floor with no Hollywood Brown, I really don't see a ceiling. He's going to be throwing the not like Michael Wilson and Rondale Moore are bad options, but um, they're not Hollywood Brown. I think Hollywood Brown is pretty good when he's on the field, and it's just not a great matchup overall. So I personally am going Nick Mullins. I think his floor is higher than his name probably suggests. And I think the ceiling is much better in a pretty good matchup that we're hoping to be a shootout.
I think you're convincing me on Nick Mullins, and I'm looking. Pro Football Focus gives him the absolute best matchup of the week for quarterbacks. It's a 10 out of 10. Man, I mean, I didn't realize how good he did last week against Cincinnati,
Yeah.
where he put up
Mhm.
19.1 fantasy points. He was the QB 11, and he threw two picks in that game, and he didn't really have anything rushing wise. He did have
Yeah.
302 touchdowns, but I feel like he could get more. You get three touchdowns in this game, man. Um,
Well, yeah, I mean, we saw him throw for 300 yards, and Justin Jefferson didn't really have like a huge day. Like, we know that he knows how to get open, and we also know that Nick Mullins at this point in his career is probably smart enough to get it to Justin Jefferson when he is open. Um, so I think, like I'm saying, he's got the type of players that can elevate him. So, and he threw for 300 last week without even getting that from Jefferson. So, um, yeah, I think he's a back end QB1, and if we see a vintage Jefferson type day, then he could be a even a top end quarterback one, as crazy as that sounds.
that's fair, man.
So
Fabian, with this question, let's get these dubs. Yes, let's get them, sir. Stuck between these QBs, I can start two: Goff, Tua, and Lamar. All of them got pretty tough matchups this week. Lamar's got the 49ers on Monday Night Football, Christmas Day, Christmas night. Tua's got the Cowboys. Goff's got the Vikings. We are just kind of talking about that matchup. So it's like, do you do you trust Goff on the road here? Or do you like play the matchup because it's probably the better matchup, I would say, slightly.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know if
It's
I
tough.
could bench like two MVP candidates just because of like the matchup. I know that like just
Mhm.
because they're MVP candidates doesn't mean that like you can't look at the game and say like, well, this is not an ideal situation for them, um, or like even an ideal fantasy situation because that can be different than the actual game. But man, I feel like
Um,
those last two, Tua and Lamar, are just going to be like they're gonna have to be like throwing or making plays to keep up. Like they're playing some great offenses. I know the Cowboys kind of like sucked last week, like very badly, um, but
mhm.
Miami's defense is like really bad. I think they could like
Yeah,
Dak could carve it out. I think Tua could be trying to tear them apart too, and they're easy to tear apart sometimes. Like you know target Deron Bland and hope you don't throw a pick. I guess. Uh, I don't know. I think I'm going two in Lamar here. I'm sticking with the Goff away storyline where he's just not nearly as good.
yeah. I'm gonna second that. Tua is getting Tyreek back. We've seen. So I was talking to my dad about it last week, and it feels like Dallas and Miami are very similar in that they both shit on bad teams and kind of struggle against good teams.
Mm,
And I could definitely see this being them each struggling against each other. I think will make them both be good. I think it's going to be a fun game. I think it'll be an offensive game, or at least I'm hoping. And especially with Tyreek expected to be back, um, two is obviously a better option with Tyreek. I would be a low end QB1 with Tyreek probably. Um, you know, so I'm gonna go with Tua as well. And Lamar is tough because that Niners defense is fucking insane, especially you
they're
know
not that good against rushing though.
yeah, that's surprising to me because I guess they must rush the passer so hard with the guys they got on that front that they give them room to escape. Maybe that's the logic. I'm not a coach,
Yeah.
I'm not an analyst like that, but I could see that being a thing. Bosa
Well,
going aggressively and
in terms of true
chasing
matchup
out there
rank,
now.
sorry, in terms of
Yep,
true matchup rank, they actually are like strong against the run, but I think that also takes into account like game script, because teams are just constantly behind against them. Like they've been blowing out teams
sure.
left and right since their bye week. Like it started with that Jaguars
Yep,
game where they won like I don't know 1,000,000 to 4, whatever the heck it was, some crazy score. And teams really haven't had like an opportunity to keep running the ball like that and get into the
hmm
end zone and score against them. And I think like
yeah,
just being behind like leads into making mistakes. Like we saw with
sure.
the Cardinals, like they were keeping pace. James Conner he got a touchdown, he got like 80 yards rushing, but overall it was like a pretty disappointing day by the end of it because they just had to feed like Trey McBride. Um, they just had to like keep throwing, and then I think he threw like two picks to like kind of just end some promising drives. And I think that happens a lot against the 49ers. I mean, they're also just very talented. So like a lot of drives, like you can't keep pace with them. Like
Yeah.
if you're like starting off, like you're like, you're like matching each other, like score, 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 score.
Right.
Like they're gonna do it better than you. That's just the
Sure.
reality of their situation when they're healthy.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe like someone needs to like go bounty gate on them. I wouldn't recommend that because that's a horrible thing to do. But literally, I don't know what you're supposed to do when they're healthy. Like you
Right.
can't beat them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know
So
where I was going with that, but yeah,
no, it's
I think
okay.
the game script it takes into account a lot of the true matchup rank, versus I
Yeah.
like to look at like things like DVOA, which takes into account like a single instance in a sense, where it's like based on this situation, did you do better or worse,
Hmm.
historically? So it doesn't take into account like the full game, like fantasy score, let's say, or like total rushing yards. It's
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
accumulation of all your plays. Um, so I do
Yeah.
think that
So
rushing wise, they could be beat.
sure. Yeah. I'm
That
gonna
was
go
my
two in
point.
Lamar. Long story short.
Okay.
I think Goff is close. It sounds crazy, like Goff versus Lamar. You probably want to start Lamar more often than not, but
Yeah.
um, this matchup, this matchup is a bit daunting to me, especially because his pass catchers are so pedestrian right now. But Zay Flowers has fallen off. Their wide receiver one has been Odell Beckham. Like it's just weird right now. And I could
Well,
see it
Isaiah
being a
Likely is like
beating.
becoming a new like weapon for
True.
them. Surprising, not
Yeah.
that surprisingly, but it's like past 3 weeks
But
out of nowhere, just like started to get back into it. Maybe he just needed some time.
yeah.
Um, so it
But
kind of looks
yeah,
like
I'm
he's
gonna go two
throwing.
in Lamar.
Okay,
Um,
fair enough.
I'm
I
gonna
think we
I'm
both
gonna
like two more.
temper expectations there a bit with Lamar, but I just think given his rushing upside and you know I'm not super worried about the Goff road narrative. I'm more worried about the matchup. I just think Minnesota has been playing out the ass lately, and they send the pass rush like nobody's business, and that's where Goff struggles the most. So I think it could be tough sledding for Goff this week. I still think they win, but I think it's going to be I don't know what the spread is. I think it's Lions plus
It's
or
like
Lions
six.
-3.
Oh, sorry, the
Is it?
Lions
Is
game. I'm
it?
sorry. No, I'm sorry. I was
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was thinking of the
Um,
the Ravens game. I can pull up that line right now though.
but I think it's going to be a close game. But I'm still going to go. I'm going to go two in Lamar here.
Yeah, well, the Lions fell from three. I think they were at 3.5 at one point, but I could be wrong. They're 2.5 point favorites right now on the road.
Mm,
But I think we're both
yeah.
taking two in Lamar, and I do agree that we should temper expectations on Lamar. I think he has some bust potential as well in terms of fantasy. Tim Petrop, the Petrop brothers, are asking questions today to beat each other. Josh Downs or Jerry Judy, and he says, let's rephrase that last question. Noah Brown, Josh Downs, Jerry Judy, Tyler Algier. Start two. I'm not starting Tyler Algier here. It is a good rushing matchup. However, it looks like Bijan Robinson will probably get back into the mix compared to last week. I don't remember what the stat was, but I
Mhm.
think like the looks that Carolina gives favors more into like how they want to play Algier. I don't know exactly why, but it seems like the Colts don't really show them those looks or whatever the stat was, and it looks like it'll be a bigger Bijan game against the Colts. Um, I will take Josh Downs against the Falcons pass defense that is just atrocious. I know in recent
Mhm.
weeks it's been like the Alec Pierce show as the wide
Yep.
receiver too, but without Michael Pittman Jr., I think they're going to have to target Josh Downs, man. And then it comes down
Yep.
to Jerry Judy against the Patriots or Noah Brown against the Browns.
I'm gonna agree with you on Josh Downs for sure. Gosh, with the guys like this, so normally against any other team, I'm probably going Noah Brown. I'm a
Mhm.
bit worried about Cleveland. And obviously Case Keenum being in there instead of CJ Stroud is a downgrade. And Nico Collins is expected to play. He's supposed to be full go, so that doesn't help either. I'm not starting Jerry Judy, and I kind of disagree on Algier just
Mhm.
because he's gonna have a touchdown appeal. Because that offense is just bonkers. I could see him going 9 for 45 and a touchdown, and but you know, jo- um, this is tough. This is tough. So Josh Downs is great. We're gonna put him in there. Certainly I don't even unrosterable, but no Pittman and a plus matchup. We're gonna go Josh Downs, and then I'm gonna go Algier.
Okay.
Um,
I do agree
and
that
you could
he could just get a touchdown and like accumulate, like you said, like 40, 45 yards. And that
uh,
like that'll be a solid showing that someone like Judy is probably gonna have a hard time replicating
yeah,
those
I mean
feats.
Jerry Judy's just a waste of space right now. Anywhere I had him, I dropped him. I just can't roster him anymore.
He had a good game last week,
And
but barely.
yeah, I don't know. I don't like it, not, especially not against New England. They're pretty good against the pass. And then
Sometimes
Noah
they are,
Brown, it's
sometimes
like,
they're not.
yeah.
I don't
Are
know
you trying to
why.
sell me on Jerry Judy?
No, I'm not actually. I'm on Noah Brown, like
Okay. Okay. All right.
pretty
Yeah.
firmly on Noah
And
Brown.
I can concede to that. I mean, like it's kind of who do you think scores more points without a touchdown? You
Mhm.
probably are assuming Noah Brown. I mean, it's 2 catches for 25 yards, and that's Algiers like ceiling without a touchdown, pretty much.
Yep.
So I can concede to that. I'm worried about the matchup. I'm worried about
It is tough.
him not being the only option. Like Dalton Schultz is back, Nico Collins is active, and it's just a shit matchup. But I mean, we know
I
no,
think
we've seen Noah Brown blow up in recent weeks, and he can. He can catch a 50-yard pass downfield. I mean, it's probably a better option. I'll go Downs and Noah Brown.
yeah, I mean last week against the Titans, um, Noah Brown 11 targets, 8 receptions, 82 yards and a touchdown. Granted, great pass matchup right there versus like you said,
Hmm.
Cleveland, not ideal. However, he's like going to be the wide receiver too. With
Yep.
Tank Dell out, I think that's the biggest piece of the puzzle to like look at. Like, you know, who are they going to feed? Obviously, Nico Collins, and then their wide receiver two, which is going to be Noah Brown. I don't know if Dalton Schultz is going to be as big of a threat. He did start to like gain like steam towards the end of the last week. I had the under
Hmm.
on his receiving yards. He was like right there. He was like right perfectly there. And then they were like, now let's just keep throwing to him. And like, 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So I'm not going to complain about that. However, I do see that his
Sure.
involvement has like started to go up. And if like Joe Flacco can work his magic again, as he has, surprisingly
Yeah.
with this, I think that this could be like a pretty, big shootout. And I think Dalton Schultz could be like that late reliable guy down the middle. But I do think overall, I'd rather bet on Noah Brown getting like solid production regardless.
Yeah. No,
But
that's fair.
I do
And
get your view
um,
on Algier.
yeah. I don't know if Denzel Ward. I don't know if Denzel Ward is like fully back. I know he's had limited snaps. He wasn't playing like a full allotment when he was back. And I also don't know if he's a shadow type of corner these days.
Mhm.
But I figure he'll probably be on Nico Collins, gives up, the lesser corners and linebackers, maybe even if Noah Brown. I don't know if Noah Brown's ever in the slot, but nonetheless, I think Noah Brown makes a lot of sense. Now that you've spelt it out for me a little bit and I've thought about it a little bit more. Because it's a similar floor with a much higher ceiling than Tyler Algier. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, it makes sense to me.
It looks like Woods would be more of the slot guy in this situation. Um, anyway, Michael, Merry Christmas, Brodo fan. Merry Christmas or Merry
Merry
Christmas Eve.
Christmas, brother.
Wishing you all a happy holiday. Happy holiday to you and your family. JSN, Jerry Judy, Josh Downs, half point PPR. I think I'm still going Downs here. I know Judy's got a great, JSN's got a great matchup against the Titans that Noah Brown just we were talking about beat pretty badly. Um,
Mhm.
however, it's still like a too many mouths to feed offense. And I do know that like the cream can rise to the top, and JSN started to show that. Like he is a very talented wide receiver. I love him. I loved him at Ohio State. I'm a big Buckeye fan. I'd rather take a shot on Josh Downs, who also has a great matchup, who I know is probably going to be. Well, actually, I don't even know if we could say confidently that he'll be like the wide receiver one or two. Like he could still get a low target share, um, but I believe in him more this week, just ever so slightly. Um, but I think JSN's pretty close to like taking over that for me.
Mhm.
What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, so it's tough. It's tough because we're hoping we see more volume with Josh Downs, which we pretty much know we're not going to get from JSN. That's just not his role right now. He's not getting, 10 targets a game. And with no Michael Pittman, I think we have to see that from Josh Downs. But I love the JSN matchup. There's a JSN question coming up later, spoiler alert, that I'm interested in talking about when we get there. But um, if with similar volume, I would expect JSN to be the play here. But I don't think we see similar volume. I think we see 5, 6 targets from JSN. And I think we're going to see damn near double-digit targets for Josh Downs, if they know what's good for them in Indy. So I'm going to go with you with go with you on Josh Downs, I think. But like you said, it's very, very close because even with limited volume, we're seeing JSN kind of become the player we hoped we'd see in the beginning of the year. And he's making big plays. We saw that nice touchdown down the seam to end the game, last week. So I like JSN a lot in this spot against Tennessee. I like all the pass catchers, but in my notes for it, they say, let's see. It says is amazing matchup, but are we going to figure out which wide receiver is the one that hits the gold? And the distribution is just so tough. It's going to be a combination of Lockett, JSN, and Metcalf. But which one is going to be the highest beneficiary? And thus far, it's probably not JSN. So I'm gonna go Josh Downs, the long-winded, just because I'm not sure how the volume is going to go.
Okay.
Otherwise, I love this matchup. It's just tough, but yeah, definitely not Judy. That's for sure. But I'm gonna go Downs. Even in half PPR, one could make the case that Jason could do more with his lesser volume and kind of even things out with half PPR. But I just think there's going to be such a high discrepancy there that we kind of need a touchdown out of JSN to elevate him over Josh Downs if Downs gets the volume that I expect him to.
Charles Kearney, happy semifinals, everyone. Happy semifinals, Charles. I hope you're in multiple of them, maybe all of them. Got a tough flex question. Got to start one. Ty Chandler, Jordan Addison, Calvin Ridley, full PPR. We've touched on this, this game a lot, the Vikings versus the Lions. I think automatically I would start Addison over Chandler. We know that even with Justin Jefferson playing, Addison can be that wide receiver too. He can be very, very good as that wide receiver too. And Chandler doesn't get like a plus matchup again. Madison's back. He's probably going to be like splitting some work. It might only be a little bit of work compared to like in the past. It's clear that he's better than Alexander Madison. But for me, it breaks down to Addison and Ridley. The Jaguars do have Trevor Lawrence. He will be playing against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They are starting to look a little healthier than recent weeks where they were missing guys like Jamel Dean, Vita Vea. Who else? Someone else. They were missing a few guys on defense, and they were just getting toasted. That being said, I think I will still go Addison, even though I think Ridley. You're the Jaguars wide receiver whisperer in a sense. The happenings, so I want to get your perspective, obviously.
Yeah. I would go Ridley in this circumstance. I'm not sure. I think it was Scott Barrett on Twitter talked about Isaiah Jones as like the skeleton key to unlocking Ridley, and as of late, that hasn't really been true. Ridley's been getting a shit ton of volume, but not. All the pass catchers outside of Evan Ingram have been getting volume and not coming through. It seems like there was a game where fucking Zay Jones had like 12 or 13, 14 targets and ended up with like 7 fantasy points. It was like really odd. But Calvin Ridley's been getting the ball force fed to him. And once again, it really hasn't come to the fruition in terms of like expected fantasy points and stuff like that. And I think this is the week, even though we have a hobbled Lawrence who somehow magically passed concussion protocol after not practicing Wednesday or Thursday. I said I think in the writers chat or in like the Brodo Discord or something, like it's crazy how players will magically clear protocol when they have to win, especially quarterbacks. But um, I'm going Ridley. I think the Addison game last week was a bit of an outlier and a bit of a product of luck. Not that I don't think he can still have a productive week. Um, I just think that the week shifts towards Hawkinson and Jefferson this week instead of seeing 6 for 111 on a 40-yard touchdown. That was a broken play.
Yeah.
Um, it just seemed a bit fluky, and I think Ridley has a higher floor, even though we've seen some duds out of Ridley. Don't get me wrong, but this is just a smash matchup, um, and I just think he has a higher floor and a similar, if not better, ceiling. If we can see him get back to week one Calvin Ridley, and he's still a great player. He's just the best player on the board right now across these three players, in my opinion. And even though Addison has such a smash matchup, he is still the third, maybe fourth option, depending on how they use the running backs. So um, I'm gonna go Ridley on this one, but I totally understand Addison. I think he's a viable play, but for me, it's just Ridley has wide receiver one upside that I don't think Addison has this week.
Okay, that's fair enough. I think they do. I think Calvin Ridley does have a great matchup this week. He probably has a much better matchup, um, but we will agree to disagree. Big freaking will, big freaking won't. Good morning, you beautiful B words. I will not repeat that. This is a family show. Need
Oh,
help in Superflex leagues, in a Superflex league to choose between two: Tua, Patrick Mahomes, Brock Purdy, and Nick. Where are you going with this?
it sounds so fucking bonkers. It sounds crazy that I'm about to say what I'm going to
To
say
bench Mahomes, yeah,
to bench Mahomes.
yeah.
Um, it's just he hasn't. His name is putting him in lineups recently, and that offense um, is not what many would have expected it to be. And we're just holding on to the GOAT, the freaking Kansas City Chiefs offense narrative when that offense is kind of shit. And Brock
Still a good
Purdy
offense.
is my MVP. No, no, they're really not though. Their defense is keeping them afloat more than their
Defense
offense.
is great. Yeah.
And it's just not. Normally, we see them putting up 30 points per game, and they're simply not. They're just not doing that this year. It's Rashee Rice. It's hardly Travis Kelce, and then a piecemeal of whatever the heck they have going on with their pass catchers. So I'm sitting Mahomes. I think I feel like I always say the Raiders defense is ass, and then you always have something to say about like the Raiders defense actually isn't that bad. And I'm like internally, I'm like, okay, sure. But looking at the numbers, their defense really is pretty solid, especially against the quarterback. They're the 24th, they're 24th in true matchup rank, so not a favorable matchup. And I'm sitting Mahomes here. Purdy is my MVP, and Tua has Tyreek back, and what we're hoping is an offensive showdown. Will it be? Probably not. It never is when we want it to be, but there's always a chance. Dallas doesn't travel well, and they're playing in Miami. Tyreek is expected to be back, so yeah, I'm gonna go Tua and Purdy, leave Mahomes on the bench, and I totally understand if I'm going to bench one of Tua and Purdy, if you want to put Mahomes in, it's probably Tua. I think you just have to ride Purdy into the sunset at this point. He's playing his ass off. That offense is pretty much unstoppable. So, but for me, I'm benching Mahomes. And if you don't want to bench Mahomes because he's Pat Mahomes, then I would bench Tua.
I completely agree with benching Mahomes. I was talking with someone in the DMs recently this week, and they were asking me if they should bench these three players. One of them was Mahomes. I said, you should bench Mahomes. Like, no offense. I think Baker Mayfield was the other guy, and it feels like so dirty to start Baker Mayfield over Patrick Mahomes. Um,
Right.
but with these options, I'm absolutely starting Purdy over Mahomes. I don't care that the Ravens defense is phenomenal. We know they can still be picked apart. The Cleveland Browns, for some reason, would put up 33 points on them. I think that was the score, 33 to 31. Um, I will start Tua. I just want to talk about Mahomes really quick and then get on to the next question. Since week 8, per Fantasy Pros, their like scoring system, his best finish was QB8. He put up
Yep.
20.8 points. He has only
Yep.
one other QB1 finish. That was against Miami. He was the QB 12. He's had a QB 15, a QB 30, 16, 20, 14.
Yep.
I think even when this offense is doing very well and Rashid Rice is scoring and Travis Kelce is getting his yards and Isaiah Pacheco is going off, um, it's still like Mahomes isn't just like a great fantasy option. He's a very solid one most of the time. Still, he's still very
Hmm.
good. His floor is still pretty solid basically every single week. Like you're probably getting like 14, 15 points out of him.
Yeah.
However, I think Brock Purdy could get 15 points checking it down if he needed to. And I think he's going to do a lot more than just checking it down, even against a great defense.
Hmm.
Like he can make tough throws.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also like the way that they just seem to get guys open, like the way that they like play it in a way that looks safe, but is like just
Yep.
very difficult to execute, apparently. Um, so I will be going with Purdy and Tua. I am pretty low in Mahomes compared to his name, and we will
Yeah.
move on. Rest in peace, Mahomes. Johnny
Yep.
Petrov says, "Thanks, boys. You are most certainly welcome." Boyd, gosh, what a couple stallions hosting this show. Not talking about me, are you?
Damn
All right.
straight.
Will, back again. Need help in the flex. Half PPR, pick two between Jerome Ford, Michael Wilson, Jameson Williams, Curtis Samuel, and Jordan Addison. My man has a lot of options.
Yeah. And I think it's pretty easy, quite frankly.
Who are
Um,
you thinking? Jordan Addison and Jerome Ford?
yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think you can
Honor.
make a case for Michael Wilson as like someone needs to get targeted, but that being said, like he doesn't have that many blow up games.
I was
Uh,
I was going to
Go
say an
ahead.
honorable mention to Curtis Samuel, actually, even in half PPR. Um, he's been it's a tough matchup against the Jets, don't get me wrong, but I think it's a tougher matchup for Terry McLaurin. I think McLaurin is going to get absolutely pieced. I think he's going to get sauced. And Jahan Dotson is, I don't know, feels like a non-factor to me. Curtis Samuel has been actually pretty reliable, getting targeted pretty well over the middle. And they do have pretty strong middle coverage as well, but it's not as strong as their outside coverage. And I think if the Commanders have any shot, they have to beat him over the middle, and that will be Curtis Samuel's game. So I think Curtis Samuel could have, maybe not a crazy ceiling by any means, but a pretty solid floor at the bare minimum. And I get the appeal for Michael Wilson for sure. I just think that game is going to be a shit show for the Cardinals. I think it's going to be tough with the way this Browns defense is playing. I love the Browns defense as a streamer this week, um, they're probably sitting on waivers right now because you see Kyler Murray, you see the Browns. You're like, why would I ever start them? But they've been
The
playing
Bears.
well, and it's a good matchup for them. Um, oh yeah, my bad. But and then Jameson Williams, you need him to catch a 40-yard touchdown, which I do have in my notes. I haven't. He's against me in the fantasy playoffs. He's against me in the fantasy playoffs this week, so
Which means he'll do good.
he's gonna score. He's gonna score. I should bet it now. The last time I said on the show I should bet something, I didn't bet it. So you know what? I'm gonna fucking bet it after I get off of here. I'm gonna do it, even though it's disgusting. I'm
Yeah.
gonna do it because he's gonna score. But
He has two
I would just
touchdowns this
not.
season. Sorry, three,
I
including a
know, and
rushing.
he's gonna, yeah, he's gonna have four after this week. But so yeah, for me it's Ford. I think he's probably not giving you a 20-point game.
Yeah.
But I think, like you said earlier, he's gonna probably give you double digits. He has a nice floor, even in half PPR. He's got a solid floor through the air. Getting 3 to 4 receptions. Joe Flacco's been throwing it to him a bunch. So and it's a pretty solid matchup. So I mean, decent. So I'm gonna go Jerome Ford and Addison with my honorable mention being Curtis Samuel, and my
Yeah.
absolute dart throw being Jameson Williams.
I like that. I like that. It seems we agree. Charles, Kearney, James Conner, and Brees Hall are better options than Judy and Noah Brown, right? Overthinking a bit, half PPR. Brees Hall against the Commanders, one of the worst defenses I've ever seen. Seem to be a little better against the run sometimes, but usually the game script doesn't even allow them to like fully exploit that. I would say for the most part they are. I am pretty high on Noah Brown this week, but I don't know if I'm high enough to bench James Conner and Brees Hall in this situation.
Yeah, Brees Hall, I'm leaving in there. I think a case could be made for James Conner. Traditionally on this show, I have been a proponent of if you have James Conner, he's probably an RB2 or a flex. You leave him in the lineup. His usage last week was a bit daunting. I mean, he still got a few catches. Like, I think he probably put up a pretty decent game overall, but, we're used to seeing an 80% James Conner snap share. And last week we saw him at 49% or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, and giving up passing work to uh, whoever I don't remember who the running back is,
Amari
but
DiMercato, maybe.
there's a third one. It doesn't really matter. I guess you're right. You're right. We're probably leaving Connor in this situation, but if you swing me on Noah Brown today, like I wouldn't hate it if you need a boom play, because I'm just not sure that Connor is going to have that boom play. I do think he'll provide you a solid floor, but I think we're seeing him take a bit of a dip. But Chicago's a pretty good matchup for the running back, so I guess you kind of got to keep it as is. Especially in half PPR, I tend to favor running backs anyway. So um, yeah, I would leave it, but I don't hate the question. I don't think it's too crazy because Connor is a bit, and especially after Brees Hall's week last week, it's a bit scary. But I think that was an outlier, and they were getting absolutely dumped on. So um, we're hoping it's a bit of a closer game in that with that Washington matchup. So I would leave it as is, but not a silly question by any means, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And the running back was former Jet Michael Carter, by the way.
Michael
So
Carter, there it
we are
is.
we
Yep.
are we are agreeing with the running backs, even though I do like Noah Brown. Michael Petrop, we got the Petrop brothers in today.
But
My dudes, I got two for you: Cole Kmet, Darren Waller, Dallas Goddard, half PPR. Also, Terry McLaurin or Jay Ascent. So we got a two-parter here. Giants against the Eagles, who are, I believe, still one of the best tight end matchups in the league. Darren Waller, I think this should be his second game back now. I just want to double check. It seems like a miracle that he even came back at this point. Yeah, he had 4 for 40 last week. Um, but Cole Kmet, man, he can be pretty hot sometimes. Cardinals are probably a great matchup for tight ends as well. I want to see what the true matchup rank says, like who has the absolute best matchup of these guys.
I'm I'm looking. So the matchups that I'm looking at is currently Arizona looks to be the 15th.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Philly is 13th,
13th.
and the Giants are 26th. So we have seen Goddard over the past couple weeks get targeted pretty heavily. It hasn't necessarily translated into production. Um, and with the way this game is gonna go on paper, I don't know how much they'll need him necessarily. Um, it's hard to bench the name though, obviously. And Waller has a bit of risk just because he can't seem to stay on the field. And, you know, depending on how that game goes, like Tommy DeVito could throw for 78 yards, like it's just like it could be tough. I mean, I know Philly's definitely been beatable through the air, don't get me wrong, but he's a nice meme, but definitely not really a viable quarterback right now. And then Cole Kmet, I've never liked really in my entire life, but it's kind of like DJ Moore and him, and then a bunch of tertiary guys that aren't really doing much. So honestly, I'd probably go Komet here. I don't think anybody has an above and beyond matchup. And um, like you said, Komet can just turn it on every once in a while. And I would be lying to you if I said I paid any attention to what Cole Komet has been doing lately, but I feel like I've seen his name around.
He's occasionally
And
scoring a bunch of touchdowns, basically.
yeah, and normally with these names, you're not looking for who's going to score a touchdown, but I don't really think any of them have the volume that we're used to seeing, like Darren Waller and Dallas Goddard. So it might be crazy. I'm probably leaning Komet in this circumstance, but it's tough. It's tough. I think whoever scores a touchdown is what elevates them over the others, as every other situation in football, pretty much. So it sounds kind of stupid to say, but I feel like in a matchup that I think the Bears will be leading, but not necessarily dominating like the Eagles could do, and not getting blown out like the Giants could be. Like I think it could be a competitive game with the Cardinals. So I'd probably lean Komet. Yeah, I feel like he's been getting pretty decent volume looking at the game logs. You know, he's had 5 catches in 7 of his last 8 games. And not scoring a ton, but I mean, I'll take five catches for my tight end any day of the week. And, you know, I don't think that's guaranteed for the other two. You would expect it to be, but I think I'm gonna go commit.
Okay. Yeah, I think I've been leaning Komet too. I think I do like Darren Waller as like maybe like a pure yardage guy just because they're probably playing catch up. But that being said, like you said, there's a big injury risk. He's very old. Even last week, I mean, it was his return. He wasn't like that great. I don't even know if he has that many like great games under his belt. Cole Kmet has 13 red zone targets, which is pretty solid this year. Um,
Hmm.
he seems to have one of the best matchups from everything that I'm seeing right now. I do want to note that I think Dallas Goedert could be like a sit for a lot of leagues this week. I think the reason the Giants don't allow a lot to tight ends is simply because they just get run on. Like their run defense is terrible. They're missing a few guys now. I don't know if Dexter Lawrence is actually officially out, but that'd be a big blow because you know let me see. It still says questionable from what I'm seeing. I don't know if he's officially going to be out, but even if he isn't, I feel like the Eagles are just going to run all over them. I don't think Dallas Goedert is going to have to get that involved very often. I mean, he could still get like
Hmm.
a few big third down receptions, a touchdown or two. Like that's still well within the range of possibilities in what should be a great offense. But man, I think it's got to be Komet or Waller, and I'm going to go with Komet. And then as for the second part of this question, we do
So
think that Terry McLaurin has a tough matchup against the Jets here. I still want to trust him, but I think I'm gonna reluctantly go JSN here.
this, yes,
And that
yes,
one is full.
yes.
That one is full PPR. Mike clarified.
So this was the JSN question that I was excited to talk about.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going JSN as well. Um, we saw Terry McLaurin blow up last week, but literally, I think 8 of his 9 catches or whatever the stat was, it was all Jacoby Brissett after they benched
Mhm.
Howell. And this is just a terrible matchup for him. And he's been so, I feel like Terry McLaurin always has some of a roller coaster vibe to him. But we've been seeing it pretty bad, and there's games where he just disappears, and he had disappeared all game until Brissett came in. Granted, that could happen again.
Mhm.
I'm not sure it will, but even if it does, I think he's getting sauced, like I said, and in a much better matchup and a player who's definitely coming along. Um, it's crazy. It's crazy. I'm saying Josh Downs over JSN, but not McLaurin over JSN. I didn't
Yeah.
think this would ever happen, but here we are. It's the playoffs. You have to make tough decisions. You don't want to be too cute with it because it's the playoffs, but I think we're seeing Jason come along a bit, and Terry McLaurin. This feels just like such a bust game for Terry McLaurin. If I were doing wide receivers in sleeper bust this week, if I still did that article, rest in peace. I would McLaurin would have been my bust. I think he's the bust of the week, and I would go JSN in this situation.
All right. Fabian, we got one more. Already started Kamara. Shake my head. Yeah, he had his worst game of the season, basically, in the semifinals. But don't know if I should roll with Zeke or King Henry for the RB2 spot, or I start both and bench Lockett, who's in my flex. This is for full PPR. There's a lot of talk about Tajay Spears becoming like the RB1 now that the Titans are officially eliminated from the playoffs. I could see them trying to get him more involved. I think in general he just gets more involved when they're losing, which is pretty often. However, it's a good matchup against the Seahawks, just in terms of pure rushing. I
Mhm.
think he's still got a couple games left in him this season. Like I don't think they're just going to completely waste him or let him, bench him. I mean, but they could try to just see what they have in Spears. Um, Zeke, I mean that's kind of your realm. He'll be the RB1 in
Yeah.
that offense against the Broncos, who can sometimes struggle against the run.
Hmm.
I think Zeke might be the safer
You know,
play here, whereas Henry's like kind of like the home run hit, but I'm not really sure. It's kind of tough right now. I'm trying to think.
yeah, it depends. So The issue is, I think in this matchup, Lockett can also be a home run hit.
Yeah.
Um, it is such, we already talked about it. We don't know how it's going to be distributed. It's very difficult to figure out which wide receiver it's going to be. One of them is blowing up this week.
Mhm.
And it just has to happen. Um, and Zeke, I think you have to leave in there because, I still think that the Denver true matchup rank is probably a bit inflated still because of that Miami game. It's really hard for it not to be. But even, even without that, it's not like they're eighth. It's not like they're 10th with that game. They're still second. Like
Yeah.
running backs are beating them. Zeke is getting all the work. He did get vultured last week, I'm pretty sure, which is hilarious. But or maybe it was 2 weeks ago. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Zeke is going to get all of the work or 90% of the work with Ramondre still out in a plus matchup. You have to use Zeke just based on volume alone. And then that leaves, Lockett versus Henry. I can't believe that. I mean, I've been fading Henry for 5 years, like the idiot that I am, and it's tough. It's tough. In games that they're losing, he's a non-factor, and we gotta imagine he's losing. But predicting game scripts is bad process in my opinion because any given Sunday, right? So that being said, I think it's crazy. I think you put Lockett in, even though you're probably down with Kamara. I think you put Lockett in, which scares the shit out of me for sure. But Henry has just been so bad, and he was great. He was great. He scored like 2 touchdowns a week for 3 straight weeks, and then last week was a dud. I'm not sure I believe the Spears narrative. If he's the guy of the future, I'm not sure why they would force feed him now when they have Derrick Henry out the door who they can force feed.
Well, it
But
could also be like they want to see like can he handle a full workload over the course of
that's
like
fair.
2 games to end the season. I
That's
think
fair.
that's
But
the
if
logic behind
they're within the 10-yard line, they're not going to put Tajay Spears in the fucking game. They're just not going to do it. It could be 3rd and 10. It could be 3rd and 17 at the 17-yard line. They're probably not using Spears. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. But anyway, Henry, it just feels like you're going to need him to take a plunge, but you have to be able to have the mindset where when he inevitably blows up on your bench, you can handle it because it's a type of player you really don't want to bench. But I think with Lockett in this matchup and you probably chasing, I'm going Lockett as crazy as that sounds. And maybe it's goofy, but we haven't seen a Derrick Henry 150-yard 3-touchdown game this year that we've been seeing from him regularly at this point in the year. We're watching him score in the red zone, but we're also used to seeing him score out of the red zone, and I don't think that's really been happening much. So with Tannehill at quarterback, very viable backup, don't get me wrong, and maybe he'll unlock that offense a bit, but I just don't see it happening this week. I'm going to go Lockett. I'm going to take the shot and hope that he's the one that blows up over Henry, I guess. It's a very tough question. I feel like I didn't give a really great answer. It's really difficult. It doesn't feel good, and that's why you're asking the question. So I'm probably going Lockett in such a good matchup and running Zeke.
All right, fair enough. I do think Zeke should get slotted in there, and I do get your point on Lockett. Charles, DST question: have the Commanders in right now, but Seahawks and Bucks are available. Do I pivot? I probably wouldn't pivot to the Bucks. I'm not like a great DST selector. I'm usually wrong. Against the Jets, I'm sure they're probably the best matchup for defenses, but and for DSTs in terms of fantasy, but they're also terrible on defense.
Yeah.
So I'm really not. You might get a little more safety out of Seattle, but I mean, I think it might be fine with the Commanders. I don't think they're going to.
I have a tough time using the Commanders, bro. They are the worst defense I've ever seen in my entire life. They are so bad. And the Jets, it's stoppable object versus movable object versus stoppable force or whatever the fuck. It's the worst offense versus the worst defense. But when it's a bad offense versus a bad defense, I think I normally lean in terms of the offense.
Mhm.
And
Well, the Jets put
I
up like
can't start the
31 on the Broncos when the Broncos defense was still bad. So yeah, maybe the Seahawks will have
yeah.
a play here.
Um, I think the Bucks are sneaky to get pressure on Trevor Lawrence with him being hindered a bit.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, you have to pivot. I think you have to pivot. So I'm probably going with the Bucks over the Seahawks, but um, I'm going the Bucks in this
Okay.
circumstance personally.
It's a sneaky play, but it could pay off. Edgardo, hey guys, full PPR bench one. Jonathan Taylor at Atlanta, Devontae Adams at Kansas City, Gibbs at Minnesota, PD. Feliz Navidad. Feliz Navidad to you. I don't know what PD means, but I assume I'm an idiot for not knowing it. Bench one. This is rough, man. You got a great
I have no idea.
roster. Use your bench.
Um,
Atlanta is probably
we
the
kind of
worst
like
of the
joke,
matchups, but I don't know if that's like enough to put me off of Jonathan Taylor.
especially with I don't know if Zach Moss is expected to play. I didn't think he was based on his
He is
injury.
out.
He's out.
He was ruled out yesterday, I think.
It does say out in my injury thing.
Yeah.
So um that that makes me like Taylor a lot more. It is not like you said, it's not a wonderful matchup. It's actually a pretty bad matchup versus Atlanta for fantasy purposes, but I gotta go Taylor in the circumstance. And then Gibbs has been playing so well. Um, but um shit.
I think
Uh
bench Gibbs, unfortunately. I think he has like the if he doesn't score a touchdown, it seems like sometimes it's really hard for him to score a lot of
mhm.
points because like David Montgomery's out there a lot. I mean, like, listen, it could still be a smash spot for Gibbs. I know a lot of people are on him. I think Clay is on him in DFS, but like, do I want to bench Devontae? I mean, he does have some pretty lackluster game logs. Last time he played Kansas City, caught 5 of 7 targets for 73 yards, but then like he could also get like 100 yards and a touchdown or two. It's kind of tough, man.
Yeah.
It's full PPR
Yeah.
too.
Um I'm looking something up real quick.
I would ever so slightly. I don't even want to bench Gibbs, but I want to bench Gibbs here. I think that's a tough call that I have to make.
Yeah, it's just such a tough matchup. But I think Snead against Devonte Adams, if he chooses to travel with him, is tough. But Devonte Adams is just so fucking good, man. And you know, um, Aiden O'Connell has decided to start giving him the ball, which is great. Um, and I think we got to ride that. I'm gonna go Adams and Taylor and sit Gibbs, which once again we talked about a similar type of question like this before we went live, and how like it's not fun to it's like it's just shit to answer because you're benching a stud, which is just never fun to do. But it's not like Taylor's injury is something that should limit his workload, I don't believe. So I'm probably gonna lean Taylor, and they're gonna have to lean Taylor with no Pittman um to win that game, I think. So I'm gonna go Adams and Taylor, sit Gibbs. Um,
That's where I'm going as
like you
well.
said, it's the touchdowns that are keeping him afloat, but um, you know, he's still a good option. It's very tough, but I'm gonna go Gibbs. Yeah.
Okay. Michael Petrop says, "Sing it with me." The Themi and the Nick. I don't know. Is that a song I should know? That might be before my time. You old people. No, I'm just
Is
kidding.
it like Benny and the Jets?
Oh, the Themi and the Nick.
There we
Okay.
go. All right.
Fabian, last one, boys. Colts, DST, or Bears. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you guys, you as well, and to your family. I think these are two great defensive matchups right now. I would ever so slightly lean the Bears. I think that they could. What was that? You just flexing on
I
people?
said I like the Bears earlier.
Oh, you
I
did.
said I
Okay.
like the
Yeah.
Bears
Yeah.
earlier.
Okay. Um,
Yeah.
but I feel like the Colts against Atlanta. I mean, Taylor Heineke's playing, but still, like it's still the Falcons. But their
The
defense is
Colts
pretty
defense is
pretty
just
rough.
so
Yeah.
ass. It is
I think
so
The Bears
ass.
pass defense, especially with Jalen Johnson there, man, they can be like so phenomenal, just picking people off, just containing teams. Um, I think Kyler might have a little bit of a tough time. I would go with the Bears as a more dynamic and even possibly the safer option. And I think you'd agree, right?
Yep. Yep.
Alejandro, Kyler or Baker? This feels like if I sit Kyler, he goes off, or I sit Baker, he throws 4 touchdowns in a shootout. Yeah, that just seems like to be the way it always works. I was actually talking about this before. Well, actually, it was between, I don't know. I was talking to someone. We were talking about Mahomes, we were talking about Baker, and then I think there was another question with Kyler, not in this crunch time, and somewhere else on Twitter. I would go with Baker. He probably has the much better matchup here. We like the Bears defense. I think Kyler could have a decent week, but I think Baker has a better shot at like blowing up um, against the Jags, who have shown that they can be pretty susceptible at times, even if their stats kind of show that they're a good defense. I think even True Matchup Rank is showing that the Jags are pretty good fantasy matchup here,
Yeah,
but I'll pull it up. Yeah, against the quarterback, I
yeah,
mean
they're
third in passing, seventh in rushing. I mean, I'm going Baker
yep,
here. When he has a good matchup, he takes advantage basically every single time.
yep. No, I second that wholeheartedly.
Okay. A0882. This is a robot speaking to us. Hopkins or Godwin, full PPR. We refuse to answer questions from robots. No, I'm just kidding. Ooh, okay. Hopkins against Seattle.
Uh,
Chris Godwin against the Jags. Chris Godwin
it's
finally
it's
had his
it's
blow up game out of nowhere. He just decided to stunt on
yeah.
us when we were so low on him.
Against me in the first round last week. That was
Oh,
a lot of fun. I got past it though, luckily, but I'm going Hopkins. I know we have Tannehill back, but Seattle they're permeable, they're beatable through the air, and Godwin we've seen shit the bed all year, and all of a sudden broke out. Most people didn't have him in lineups last week. I saw him against me in lineups, and I was like giggling, like I was so excited and
that
happy,
happened
and
to
then
me
he
with George Pickens
absolutely,
yesterday. I had
yeah.
Puka, and then I was like, oh, he has George Pickens. Like, all right, it's a free win at that position for me. Um, it wasn't. Uh,
Yeah, but I'm going Hopkins. They both have good matchups. I'm going to take the guy that's been producing pretty consistently. Nothing insane, but it's him. It's him or nobody in the passing game. A little bit of Chig lately, I guess, but we'll see how things transpire with Tannehill at quarterback. But I'm going to go Hopkins over Godwin just because Godwin last week feels like fool's gold. It feels like a fluke, and he's going to go back to doing his Godwin thing this week. Um, and I'm just more confident about Hopkins. Even if Godwin has a good game, it's probably 5 for 50, and that's a good game. And he probably doesn't score a touchdown because he really hasn't been this year. So I'm going to go Hopkins in this matchup.
I like it. I'm going Hopkins as well. Triple hunts. Put Waddle or Garrett Wilson wide receiver 2. I'm flexing Hubbard over them. I would put Waddle in the flex for sure, or in the wide receiver 2. Would I flex Chuba Hubbard? I mean, he seems to be like matchup proof, game script proof. Like he just gains yards
He's
regardless of what's going
yeah,
on. It's phenomenal. I thought Miles
yep,
Sanders would have a decent season, and I actually thought Miles Sanders
yep,
would have a good season, very good season, and he
yep.
hasn't. He started pretty hot, I think, but he's just sometimes getting
A
back in the mix.
non-factor.
But yeah,
Uh,
it's basically Hubbard there. I think I would still start Garrett Wilson over him. This is one of the best matchups you'll ever see for him. Uh,
yeah.
he can get
I mean
forced
the
at times.
Packers though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Packers are
it's
susceptible, but like against
it's
the
it's
run. But
tough. Um, I would start. Oh man, the Commanders are so good though. It's kind of like,
you mean so bad, but like so good of a matchup.
yeah. Yeah, it's a good matchup. It's just like all of these players are in pretty good spots this week, I think. Um,
I think the thing is Hubbard probably has a better chance at scoring a touchdown than Garrett Wilson. Like Garrett Wilson has 3 touchdowns this season,
mhm,
and in those games his yardage was very rarely great. When he has good yardage totals, it's usually not with a touchdown. It doesn't mean that it can't happen. Just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean that it can't now that he has like probably the best matchup he's ever seen.
yeah,
But I could also see a situation where he gets a touchdown or he gets a lot of yards and not both.
it's
And then Hubbard gets like 70, 80 yards on the ground, a couple receptions that maybe don't go for much, but he
yeah.
still gets a touchdown.
I'm
That's kind of what
probably going. I'm going Waddle and Hubbard and expecting Garrett Wilson to have a good game on the bench. It's kind of like I think all of these guys produce. I say
Mhm.
this, I'm a broken record. I normally say the same couple phrases once per week, but I think it's all relevant. This feels like one of those situations where all of these guys are going to produce, and you're trying to pick which one produces less. I think it's very difficult. But with the volume Hubbard has been getting, he's just been absolutely dominating touches there. It's absurd. So I'm gonna go Hubbard and Waddle, and then leave Garrett Wilson on the bench, which it just sucks. But I don't know how you can bench Hubbard with the way that he's been producing and just getting all the volume ever since the coaching change there. I mean, he's got 20 plus touches over the past, or 20 plus carries over the past 3 weeks. The lowest amount of touches he's had is 24. He's had at least 87 yards on the ground all 3 weeks. So yeah, I'm gonna go Chuba Hubbard in a pretty positive matchup over Garrett Wilson.
All right. Isaiah Simpson, full PPR, Brandon Cooks, Odell Beckham, or Romeo Doubs, with the news that Jaden Reed is out. Brandon Cooks is Brodo's sleeper wide receiver of the week. I don't remember if that was Matt that wrote that. Boyd, one of them wrote about it. It wasn't me. So don't blame me. No, I'm just kidding. I do think Brandon Cooks probably has the best matchup. Carolina can be pretty dang good against the pass. It also helps that they're pretty dang bad against the run. Probably the worst run defense in the league right now, even if it didn't show last week against the Falcons, because it is the Falcons. And teams can just show up. It doesn't mean that just because they have a bad unit doesn't mean that like every single week they're going to allow 200 rushing yards. Odell Beckham seems to be that kind of guy who, one, probably doesn't have that great of a matchup, and two, kind of relies on like big plays. Like sometimes he can show up and just be the guy, get like 100 yards and a touchdown. But man, it doesn't seem like the type of game that's going to favor that. I think Brandon Cooks against the Dolphins in what should be a high-scoring game, he'll have the best opportunity for scoring and yardage.
Yep.
But I know Romeo Doubs can just go off sometimes too. Like it's just not so sexy names in those last two guys that sometimes are just phenomenal. I don't know. What do you think?
For me, it's pretty easily Cooks. In one of my playoff matchups, my opponent had Odell Beckham Jr. and 3 bench spots and dropped Odell to pick up KJ Osborne. And then I bullied him into my own opponent. I bullied him into picking Odell back up and using him against me.
Oh my God.
But nonetheless, I don't think it's going to be anything great. I think Cooks is the obvious answer here. I think that Panthers pass defense is so underrated every single week because the Panthers just fucking suck that people just don't like to acknowledge it. I like Dubs a lot as a player, but I'm not using him this week, so I'm just going Cooks. We're hoping it to be a shootout. Miami's pass defense is not very good. So they've got a lot of injuries on that defense too right now. So I'm gonna go Cooks. I think we see a pretty decent game out of him, honestly.
I like it. The A team. I have a couple this week, fellas. Huge matchups. I am overthinking this one, but in one league, half PPR, would you start Devin Singletary over any of the following? Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott? Yeah, I don't think I am either. I mean, all three of those guys, they're going to get volume. I know we were kind of lower on Gibbs, but that was compared to guys like Devontae Adams and Jonathan Taylor. And even then, we weren't like very happy about benching him. It's just, the situation that you're in. Devin Singletary, I think he did go off. Maybe it might have been last week where he had like a pretty tough matchup. He had 121 rushing yards, 4 receptions, 49 yards. But still, man, all three of those guys, touchdown potential. High carry, just like going off. I mean, basically, maybe not high carries all the time, but
I don't know. Start your studs. I just think. Yeah, I don't mean to cut you off. I mean, I do mean to because I'm doing it, but I don't even think we have to discuss it. I don't think we have to look anything up. I think you just start your guys, and Singletary's been playing well. Don't get me wrong. I think he's got that backfield to himself now for the most part, but I'm not doing it. I'm leaving these guys in.
Okay. And then the A team again in my dynasty league, full PPR, Jake Ferguson or George Kittle.
I'm going Ferguson.
I think that's where I'm leaning as well. I just want to see, like, in terms of true match rank, I mean, it must be favoring Jake, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he is the play. Um,
Yeah, it's just I think we
Miami,
had a
Miami's
very
eight.
sorry.
Baltimore, pretty tough against them, but
I think maybe it was 2 weeks ago or something. We had a very similar question like this, maybe this exact question the
yeah.
last time I
I
was
mean, I
on
think it
here.
was, yeah.
And it's just Kittle's just the odd man out. I mean, Ferguson has pretty consistent volume. He gets looks in the red zone. He's got a better matchup. We know Kittle can have those boom games. It's just how that offense is catered to explosion. It's just how it works. But normally, if anyone's the odd man out because he's such a good run blocker, because he's such a good just blocker in general, just because Ayuk and Debo and McCaffrey are all just so fucking studly that he can be phased out, not because it's a bad matchup, not because he's bad, but just because that offense is so good outside of him that he can go 2 for 40 and then you get 6 points. And Ferguson is at least getting reliable volume, reliable usage, and getting volume in the places where you need him to get volume in the red zone. So I'm gonna go Ferguson.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking as well. But I mean, both these guys could just get like 70 yards and a touchdown, and I wouldn't think anything of it. But that red zone usage
Mm-hmm.
and the ability for George Kittle to just like not have to do anything as a receiver, I think you go with Ferguson there. And would you start Nico Collins over Rashee Rice or Devontae Smith this week?
Not over Rice for me. I think a case could be made for Devontae Smith
Mm-hmm.
just because Devontae Smith with Dallas Goedert on the field is not targeted as much. His production tends to take a dip. But I think I don't know. It depends. Just kind of like our Josh Downs over JSN argument that we were talking about before.
Mm-hmm.
If you think Nico Collins is going to have above and beyond volume, that I'm not sure we'll see from Devontae Smith. And Devontae Smith is the type of player that can garner volume. But if you like the volume over the efficiency, then I would say you could go Nico Collins over Devontae Smith. I think Devontae Smith is the better player in the better offense and the better situation this week. So I'm staying Devontae Smith and Rashee Rice, but I wouldn't knock you for starting Nico Collins over Devontae Smith personally.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not doing it myself. He's playing coming off of injury with a backup quarterback in a tough matchup. It's just he can produce. He's a good player, but I'm gonna go Devontae Smith over him in this circumstance. I think by a slim margin.
Yeah, it's really tough for me too because I think Devontae Smith, like like anyone in like a great offense, can often be the odd man out, but that doesn't necessarily mean you always want to bench them, even if you have a good option on the other side. I mean, he has a great matchup this week against the Giants. Like their cornerbacks just aren't it most of the time. Deontay Banks, Cordell Flott, Dory Jackson, like those guys, like sometimes they'll make plays and sometimes they just get like obliterated. I do think that like the team should just like be able to run all over the Giants. However, there's still going to be some passing early on. If the Giants can keep it competitive for a little bit or even a lot of it, it's entirely possible that Devontae Smith is just in the mix. And I think their floors are pretty similar. I might just take a shot on Devontae Smith to score a touchdown here, whereas Nico Collins is probably much tougher matchup. Um, Even taking game
Yeah,
script into account, I think I would slightly lean Devontae Smith as well. Appreciate you all. Merry Christmas, brothers. Merry Christmas to you, the A team.
Merry Christmas,
Tell
dude.
Mr. T that I say hi. Just kidding. I do. They should bring back the A team, man. Did they ever bring it back?
Honestly,
Marco says Nico Collins or Monstert. I don't know if that's a misspelling or a nickname because that is awesome. Like
yeah,
I
it's
know
pretty
Raheem
good.
Mustard. Raheem Mustard is like his name, but like Monstert, like that's
Yeah.
he's like Frankenstein's monster.
Hmm.
For flex PPR, I'd probably go Raheem Mostert here. I mean, he's got to be second or third in rushing. He's got to be leading the league in rushing touchdowns. He's in an offense that wants to make him the number one option, and it's an incredible offense. I don't know if the rushing game is going to necessarily be as good as what the Bills did with James Cook against them last week, the Cowboys, but man, I can't bench Mostert, not for
Yeah, you
Nico,
have to use him.
especially.
You have to use him. I think it's
Might
Mostert
get
pretty
dropped.
easily.
Also, I'm a Jets fan, obviously, LOL. But Nick, your hat is tremendous. It is tremendous. I wish I had
Thanks, man.
some Christmas gear to wear. Next year I will, I promise. Jake from IT, need to start two, running back and flex. Chan, Ty Chandler, King Henry, or Aaron Jones. Um, okay, well, they're all running backs, actually. I was trying to figure out. Okay, yeah, so they're all running. Oh, but he means
Mhm.
like it's his first flex spot.
Yeah, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think even though he has been a letdown when he's playing, I think I'm
Chan.
still gonna go Aaron Jones
Hmm.
um, versus Carolina. I think AJ Dillon is active, but I don't really care. Like he'll get work, but um, I just think Aaron Jones is simply the better player by a wide margin. Um, and then with the other three, it's you know Chandler might get the most work out of all these guys, but it is not a good matchup. We just don't know how it's going to go. It could end up being a 55-45 split for all we know in that backfield. Achan, we know, you know, he got 12 touches last week, but didn't really do much with it. And we know that they're cautious of the fact that he's been injured a couple times now and probably playing with turf toe. Um, just
He also could have
speculation. It's not
scored a few
confirmed.
touchdowns last week, and he was like just short of it.
Yeah. I mean, the upside with HN is crazy, as we know. And it should be a bit of a passing matchup against
Mhm.
Dallas, I would think, if it's the type of game that we think it might be, which between the two running backs, that's HN's game. Um, and then we already talked about King Henry a bit. I think I go Aaron Jones and HN and take that risk. Um, I mean, even with having a down game, he still finished with, I think, 10 points last week or nine or, in PPR, a decent floor to have, especially without a touchdown. Um, and yeah, I think one of the plays was like a botched snap on the 1 yard line. That was definitely going to be a pass to him, pretty open in the end zone.
Yeah,
That ended up being a fumble. So,
which I'm
yeah, I'm
thankful
okay
for
with going
because
HN here. Yeah. So HN and Aaron Jones for me. And Aaron Jones has not been great, so I understand it. And Ty Chandler just blew the fuck up last week, and he could have another high volume week again. But um, Aaron Jones is a one play type of player, and the Carolina Panthers are so susceptible to the run, as you talked about previously, that I think I got to plug him in and take the risk there and hope for a low floor, high ceiling play. And um, and I think I go HN as the flex or whatever the other option.
yeah, that's interesting. I was thinking of going Aaron Jones, but it seems like even when he has like everything set up for him to like smash, like he very rarely does so. I mean, his best game was against the Rams when they won 20-3. I honestly forget the name of the quarterback that was starting because it wasn't Stafford. It was some other guy filling in for him. And he ran 20 times, 73 yards. He scored a touchdown. He gets pretty decent usage as a receiver, which I think helps his floor a lot. But man, I'm just kind of over like trusting him, man. I know everything's set up for him to smash this week. I know that like he could probably get to 10 points without a touchdown. But
Mhm.
I think I'm gonna go Achan and Derrick Henry reluctantly. I feel like all four of these guys like have so much appeal and then like so much like to like be disgusted by, um, just based on like offense or I mean it's mostly not offense, but it's mostly like just how they've performed in recent weeks. Like I know Chandler just had a great game, but it's not like the matchup for him. I don't know. I feel like I'd rather take a shot on Derrick Henry just ever so slightly even though he had like 20 carries for like negative 80 yards last week. I don't think I could bench him this week, man. Again, over these guys, it's so tough though. But I do
So
think
Henry and HN is what you're saying?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, that's
But
okay.
I
I
feel like
mean,
Aaron Jones is the safer play over Henry by far. By far, he's probably the safest play of
sure.
all these guys. Maybe
Um,
Chandler's a little safer,
yeah,
um, but I don't know, man.
yeah. I don't know. It's It's brutal, is what it is. I'm still sticking with my Aaron Jones and Achane, and I'm just trusting that Aaron Jones is getting a bit healthier and he can take advantage of this defense. But I totally understand where you're coming from for sure. Um,
Most of the
if I
time
had
that
to,
we disagree, you end up being right. So I mean, we should just go with Aaron Jones then. But if I say Aaron Jones, then he won't go off. So I'm going to say King Henry, but actually Aaron Jones.
fair enough, fair enough,
um,
fair enough.
Triple Hunts flex Chuba, Kenneth Walker. I assume that's Kenneth Walker or Garrett Wilson full PPR and start Kyler Murray or Joe Flacco at quarterback. Hmm.
Um,
Kenneth Walker against the Titans, pretty brutal matchup. But I mean, he's a beast. He had that giant run yesterday for a touchdown. Um,
yeah.
I think I'd start both of those
Um,
guys over Garrett Wilson. So it's kind of for me deciding which of the running backs I like more. I assume that's a similar case for
mhm.
you.
Um, uh, I love Garrett Wilson this week. I'm going to start at the quarterback. I'm going to go Flacco over Kyler Murray. I'm fading Kyler Murray pretty hard this week, just so that we can provide a bit of an answer.
Mhm.
Um, and I do have to get going relatively soon. So I'm going to go, yeah,
I'm almost done.
I'm going to go, yeah, I'm going to go Flacco over Kyler Murray. And then I think I just have a hard time starting Chuba Hubbard like as the player over these guys, but he's just been playing so well and getting so much usage. And, Kenneth Walker, um, doesn't have a too great of a matchup, but he has been going beast mode lately. Hard to put him on the bench. I probably go Kenneth Walker. I'd probably go Kenneth Walker,
And you like Joe Flacco as well over Murray.
and I like Joe Flacco. Yeah,
I think I think I'm going to go Flacco as well. Even though I'm waiting for him to finally have that bad game. I mean, like he had 3 picks last week, and he was still pretty dang good because he had almost 400 yards. He had two passing touchdowns. Like even at his worst, he seems to be pretty good for fantasy. Um, I will go Flacco, unfortunately.
yeah,
Um, and then I think I'm going to agree with Kenneth Walker. I do think Chuba Hubbard might have a bit of a more solid floor, but I'm not benching Kenneth Walker, unfortunately. Andrew Croucher, what's up, boys?
yeah,
Pick full PPR: Zeke, Chandler, Swift, Garrett Wilson, Sutton, and I assume Amari Cooper. Definitely starting Swift. Smash matchup. I'm probably going to
mhm,
start Amari Cooper as well. And then
yep.
for me, hmm, on that third guy,
Zeke.
yeah, you think so? That's kind of where I'm leaning, but yeah, I think
Yeah,
Zeke might have
I
to be
because
the
I
guy.
agree with you on Swift and Cooper. So then I would finish with Zeke.
I'm trying to see like what kind like true matchup rank can give us a little bit of a. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
I'm trying to think if Cortland
true
Sutton
matchup
might be a
rank.
better play here. That's the only thing.
You think Sutton could be better than Zeke? I do not. I think Sutton has he will either put up 70 yards or a touchdown and never crack. He hasn't scored 20 fantasy points in a game. I just think his upside, I would probably go Garrett Wilson over Cortland Sutton if we were
Mhm.
talking about Sutton. But for me, I'm going Swift. I'm going Cooper pretty easily, and then for me, it's Zeke over everybody else.
Yeah,
He's going to
I
get the
think you're right
usage
there.
in a plus matchup. I mean, he could catch more balls than both Garrett Wilson and Cortland Sutton by himself. Granted, the yardage probably won't be there, but he's going to get over 20 touches, or he should, I should say, um, in a pretty good matchup. And he didn't necessarily have the production we would hope with the usage that he got last week, but this week I think is a different story. I think he's going to have a pretty damn good game. I think he's a fringe RB1, and I would ride him into the sunset this week. AO, but go Pats.
I think that's fair. I didn't realize Cortland Sutton's yardage totals were like pretty low most weeks. So if he's not catching
Mhm.
a touchdown, and even if he is, it's pretty rough. I think Zeke's workload could be what puts him over the edge here. Benjamin here. Merry Christmas, fellas. Merry Christmas, Benjamin.
Merry Christmas, dude.
PPR, Drake London or Josh Downs. Drake London with Taylor Heineke at quarterback against the Indianapolis Colts. Josh Downs against his team. I mean, it seems pretty easy to me that Josh Downs is the play here. I love Drake London as a talent. He was my hat hanger this year. Obviously didn't work out. I was blinded by the talent. The situation was just too much to overcome. And maybe sometimes even if he has like the athleticism or whatever, like it doesn't necessarily mean that he's always going to be successful. Perhaps a little too high on him. He could still have a boom week. Like he has boom weeks every once in a while, but man, I'm going to take a shot on Downs in a great matchup here. Whereas the Falcons are going to do what they love to do and run the ball in a great rushing matchup. I think that's just the reality of the situation.
I would go London. I would take the better player in this circumstance. 2 weeks ago we saw him go absolutely apeshit, and then last week he fell off the face of the earth for some reason. I don't think we see that happen 2 weeks in a row. I think he has a pretty damn good game this week. I would go Drake London over Josh Downs, especially in half PPR. He may not have the volume that Downs has, but he also could. But even if he doesn't, I think the plays that he tends to make are the bigger, more splash plays. And I also think he has a better chance of a touchdown than Josh Downs does. So I'm going to go Drake London in this case. And I get where you're going with Josh Downs. I just think that Drake London could be primed for a big game again. And because Taylor Heineke's not scared to sling that shit. So granted, he didn't come in last week, did he? Did he come in last week? I don't remember, but
I
nonetheless,
don't believe so. But let me double check. I mean, I don't know if it mattered that much, but
yeah, it probably doesn't matter. But I'm gonna go. Well, Drake London had a shit game, which is why I like.
No, he didn't. He hasn't played since November 12th.
Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna go Drake London, and I'm doing it pretty confidently. And I'm not a huge Drake. I'm not like a big Drake London homer or anything like that. I think he's a very good player. I was off of him this year actually, but I think this week he's in a pretty good spot.
I think that's fair. I mean, sometimes I lean too much on the matchup and like not enough on like what's actually like happening. But I see your point on Drake London. It's kind of weird that like I'm so high on him generally, and then I'm like this week I'm like no, and then you're like low on him. You're like, okay. I mean, we will agree to disagree. I don't know how much that helps you, Benjamin, but I see a case for both players. If you do want to lean the matchup, Josh Downs has it. If you want to lean the player who gets a pretty big upgrade, I mean an upgrade, but gets a better situation in terms of passing, maybe. It could be that Drake London has a great week. So that's it, guys. Doesn't look like we have any more questions. Thank you so much for listening. We will have our final crunch time next week. Join us if you made the finals, and if you didn't, like me, probably. Man, we'll still be here answering questions. Enjoy your Christmas. Enjoy your whatever. Enjoy your holidays, and have a great week. Good luck in fantasy.
Yes, ma'am. Merry Christmas.